If you watch mainstream sports media, then you've likely heard them say this over and over again, that LeBron is playing at a greater level at this age or at this stage of his career than anyone who's ever played. 35 years old, 17th year in the NBA, and he's an MVP candidate. But the media has a tendency of sensationalizing things and making bold statements that truly just shows that they're a slave of the moment. Is that what they're doing here though? Well, that's where this video comes in, as we analyze and compare LeBron's play to other great players at that stage of their career. Now before we continue, let me first say that if you're one of those fans who loves to comment on my videos saying, "Stop comparing the greats, man, just appreciate greatness," then please.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
The very nature of sports is competition. If you score more points than the other team, then you win and they lose. It's a measuring stick by nature. The day Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain were both receiving an award, they argued about who is the greater player. Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan used to argue about who would win a game of one-on-one. On different occasions, Shaq and Kobe both had to remind each other who had more rings than the other guy. And LeBron James felt the need to let us know that he thinks he's the greatest player of all time. So not only do we basketball fans do all this comparing, but the very legends that we're comparing do it too. Anyway, now that I've got that out of the way, let's start comparing LeBron to some other greats. I want to look at the comparison in two ways. First is at the age of 35 years old, which in this case there will be much more comparisons to make considering that many great players play beyond the age of 35. The other comparison is with players in the 17th year of their career, which will really limit the amount of players to legitimately compare James with, because to LeBron's credit, most NBA players don't come all that close to playing 17 seasons in the league, and those that do are almost never all that great at that point. So first off, 35 years old. This video won't be long enough for me to visually compare LeBron to every other great who's ever played, so you'll have to just take my word for it on this list that I give you, and feel free to comment if you think there's another player who belongs in this group. Here are other greats who, just like LeBron, were MVP candidates at the age of 35. Karl Malone, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Steve Nash, Wilt Chamberlain, and Michael Jordan. Let me compare one by one, starting with Karl Malone. Now in 1999, the league was experiencing a lockout-shortened season, which was only 50 games. Karl played in 49 of the 50 games and was the MVP of the entire NBA, and is still the oldest player to ever win the league MVP award. He led the Jazz to a 37-13 record before being eliminated in the second round of the playoffs. Here's how the numbers stack up against each other from the two 35-year-olds. Now at first glance, LeBron's numbers definitely look significantly better, but more context is needed here in order to make a fair case for Malone. The NBA right now is enjoying some of the most statistically productive games in all of its history. Teams today across the league are averaging 111.5 points per game. To put in context how productive that is, know that it's the highest league average the game has seen since the days Wilt Chamberlain played basketball. Now in 1999, when Karl put up these numbers, the league was literally the complete opposite, as the pace of play was significantly slower and many of the rules didn't allow as much offense and possessions. In 99, teams were averaging only 91.6 points per game. If you exclude basketball before the 1960s, then 1999 is literally the lowest scoring season of NBA history. Along with that, teams today are averaging nearly 12 more possessions per game than they did in 1999. Getting this many more opportunities will affect every major statistical category: points, rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals. So it's only fair to assume that if LeBron played in 99, his numbers would decrease by a bit, and if Malone played in 2020, his numbers would increase by a bit. This is why that despite the fact that LeBron's numbers are higher, their player efficiency rating is the exact same, because the PER stat factors in those aspects, like amount of possessions, league averages, and so on. Now PER isn't a perfect stat, so it's a little too simplistic to look at whose PER was higher and simply conclude who was the better player based on that stat, but it can help provide more context. LeBron probably gets the edge here, but when you have the full context, it certainly makes it less conclusive. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the second comparison, but I'll be quick with this one. Kareem had a solid year at 35, and he was within the top 10 of MVP voting, but his numbers were significantly lower than LeBron's, although that hook shot was as efficient as ever, as he shot 58.8% over the season. Kareem also didn't have the deflated era argument like Karl Malone does, so LeBron has almost certainly got Kareem beat there. Next up is Steve Nash, which might surprise a lot of people, but he was actually really solid. He finished 8th in the MVP voting that year and played 81 out of the 82 games. He led Phoenix to a 54-win season and the third best record in the Western Conference. Not only did he average 16.5 points, but he led the league in assists per game with 11. Among those nice stats, he was also the model of efficiency, as he had his 4th 50-40-90 season, making him easily the oldest player to ever accomplish that feat. Unfortunately for Nash, there's almost no argument I can make for him over LeBron for one significant reason, and that's the defensive end. Steve Nash was never known to be a fantastic defensive player, but especially when he was a slower 35-year-old point guard. LeBron, on the other hand, has looked completely revitalized on the defensive end this year. In years past, I've been critical of LeBron's defense as he's gotten older, but I can't complain this year as he is somewhat likely to make a 2020 All-Defense team. So once again, LeBron takes this one. Now we look at Wilt Chamberlain, which is probably the most tricky comparison, but is a very legitimate one. In the 71-72 season, Wilt was well past his insane scoring days, but he also reinvented his game to be one that was more inclusive as he focused more on rebounding and on the defensive end. Wilt led his team to 69 wins, which was an NBA record for decades. Along with that, he pushed the Lakers to their legendary 33-game winning streak, which is still easily the longest streak of all time. These are his numbers in comparison to LeBron's. He scored his near 15 points per game on an insanely efficient 65% shooting. He was a monster on the boards as always, and it's also important to keep in mind that the NBA didn't track blocks and steals until the 1974 season, which is truly a disservice to Wilt because many have said that his blocks numbers would have been astronomical. The Defensive Player of the Year award also did not exist yet at that point, but many who witnessed him play believe there's a good chance he would have won the award that season if it had. Not only all of that, but Wilt also led his 1972 Lakers to win an NBA championship, and he was the Finals MVP. I could argue either way, but one thing is for sure, LeBron doesn't have a clear-cut edge over Wilt's 35 season. The last 35-year-old comparison is none other than Michael Jordan. This was Michael Jordan's famous Last Dance season with the Chicago Bulls. Statistically speaking, LeBron once again appears to have the clear edge, but Jordan in 1998 was like Karl Malone in 1999, played in a slower era with less offense, less possessions, and generally less stats to go around. So it's safe to assume that MJ would have had a bit of an uptick in another era. MJ led his Bulls to a 62-20 record, which was tied for the best record in the league. Along with his nice numbers, he played all 82 games, won the league MVP, the All-Star Game MVP, he led the league in scoring, he was first team All-Defense, he won the championship, and he was the Finals MVP. There's not really much he didn't accomplish this season. Now again, many of these things we're still yet to see if LeBron will be able to accomplish by season's end. But at the very least, I think it's a bit premature to say he's playing at a higher level than any other 35-year-old ever has, considering mainly how Jordan and Wilt played. Let me be clear though, LeBron being 35 is just one way of looking at it. What many people consider even more impressive from him is the amount of miles on his legs and the fact that he's in his 17th season as a serious MVP contender. Although Jordan, Wilt, Malone, and others had great 35-year-old seasons, none of them had played an entire 17 years of NBA basketball at that point. When it comes to a comparable level of basketball, that many years in the league, there's only one player who's ever been arguably on that level, and that's Kobe Bryant. In the 2012-2013 season, Kobe had one of the greatest seasons of his career that was overshadowed by the unmet expectations of a super team who was riddled with injuries. If you're curious to hear about the season in depth, check out my video on this year, which I call Kobe's Last Stand. People don't realize how great he was this season, that despite a coach who didn't work well with his personnel, a slew of injuries to his supporting cast, and drama surrounding the team's every move, Kobe still basically single-handedly willed this team into the playoffs right up to the moment his Achilles popped. Many of his most iconic moments, from his athletic dunks to his clutch fourth quarters, came from the 17th season. As Kobe himself said, he felt like he was playing some of his best basketball. These are how the numbers stack up in comparison to LeBron's, the two greatest 17th seasons we've ever seen. Now, to LeBron's credit, one of the most impressive things about his 17th year in the league is how he's reinvented himself. To be in your mid-30s as a 6'9" player and then switch completely to the point guard position and not just do well, but to actually lead the league in assists as you score 25 points a game on the best team in your conference? That's certainly hard to beat. But can I say definitively that it's the best season we've ever seen from someone at that stage of their career? No, I can't. Not if we include these other great seasons we just talked about from these other players. I will say this though. If LeBron plays at this level next season, when he's 36 years old in his 18th season, then he will definitively be the greatest ever at that stage of his career, and no one will have a legitimate argument against it. Let me know in the comments section who you think was the greatest ever to play at the age of 35, and would you take a healthy Kobe or LeBron in year 17? I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.